The door opens. All right, so if you guys are watching, here's the idea. Okay, so we are going to, at the end, rate the raids. But before then, we're going to just rank all of the bosses. And I'll probably just go in the random order that they are here. I'm probably not going to do them like based on the raid or whatever. Just kind of do that. I'll give a little bit of what I think about the boss, but very important. For me, I'm probably going to lean into like the design of the fights. The tuning and how they were on progression will matter, but it won't, like everything's going to matter. The design, the uniqueness, how it was tuned on progression, it's definitely going to matter, but I don't want it to be the main thing. Like a lot of people look at a boss being like insanely hard and they'll be like, F that fight, but like it could be a really good fight. And also you need to have it be relevant to the position it is in the raid. Like for example, if you're going to put any end boss up against Eye of the Jailer, Eye of the Jailer is D, but Eye of the Jailer isn't supposed to be that. They're not created with the same level of effort or intensity or difficulty. That's just, they're not supposed to, you can't rate them against each other. So what you can rate Eye of the Jailer against is against the average second or third boss in WoW and what should be expected from those fights, and then everything else would apply to it. So it's based on like where it is in the raid. Like for example, you could make the argument that like Shriekwing or whatever, I don't feel this way about Shriekwing, but you could say it's an S tier because it's like a perfect first boss or something. And that would be fine. And you could be putting it up there against Denathrius. But like obviously these two fights are trying to accomplish different things, but it's possible that a first boss is actually just the best first boss, right? So that is the idea for this. All right, so starting off, let's actually put these at the bottom because we're gonna rate the things at the bottom. All right, so let's start with Eye of the Jailer. Not gonna lie, Eye of the Jailer is a pretty cool second boss, and you're gonna see this as a theme for Sanctum in general, is that Sanctum, the beginning to the middle of Sanctum was actually kind of popping off, like really good mid-tier bosses, really good early bosses. And then it's really at the end when Sanctum became one of the worst raids they've made. I want to say Eye of the Jailer for a second boss. It's got an ad phase. You do have to be split up. I don't think the mechanic I'm going to mostly be talking about the mythic versions of these fights as well for you guys. Like coming close to other people and blowing up is not like super damaging. I also like how it's cool that guilds had very different strats for this fight. Like our strat on Eye of the Jailer was like, you know, we like had our 2 raids on each side. And then if we just like usually just never swapped and burned through it. But like early in progression, I think at the very end of the fight, we had this situation where like, you know, we had 2 gates down, right? We brought 2 warlocks. We did these 2 gates and like group 1, basically, let's just say this smiley face. Group 1 is here and group 2 is here. And then the eyes we are fighting are each here. And then like you would just swap. So you would never come in contact with each other, and if you ever wanted to swap, make the phase easier, this group would gate to here, and then this group would gate over to this side, and the tanks would all swap and everything, and they would taunt, and then your stacks would run out, and you could keep doing the phase and lower the amount of damage you were taking. And that was our strat. Now, other strats were totally different. I think maybe the most fundamentally different is Echo. So Echo's strat, when they first did this fight, was they like kind of tanked these where they spawned, and only 1 tank and like 1 healer, I think, stayed on this side, and the entire rest of the raid was here, right? And they like got this one to like 10%, and then this tank and healer would like, the tank and healer would never swap, and then like the rest of the raid gated from this chain to this chain, and then let their stacks drop before they came in contact with the healer and the tank. I think the healers would swap at one point, and then they would now get this one low, so the entire raid was with each other the entire time, and then they just had their melee stay on this guy, their range go over once this one got lower, and then they like figured out how to do the other one. Anyways, 2 entirely different strats that are both viable that you do in a phase, and I think the fact that you could do something like that on a second boss gives this boss some points for sure. I want to say Eye of the Jailer, man, it really wasn't like insanely exceptional. I don't know if I want to give it an A. I just want to say it was a very, oh man, it is a good second boss. What do you guys think, chat? A or B? A or B for a second boss? It's not a C. It's an A or B. I'm seeing like B's. Seeing B's. Let's go. It's high B, low A. Let's just go with B for now. Maybe we'll change our idea later. Okay, so the next 2 bosses, I believe these are both Xy'mox. Is anyone smart enough to know which one is from which raid? The left one is Nathria. The right one is... Okay, so first of all, I love the whole Xy'mox concept of bringing that boss back throughout the whole expansion. Not a huge lore person, like his role in Season 4 and like what those, like the people around Xy'mox and all that stuff in Veiled Market, Tazavesh, all that stuff. I think that stuff's really cool. Also, that Xy'mox was a great fight. Okay, so Xy'mox from Castle Nathria. I thought this fight was fantastic. Like, so good. For a mid-raid boss, maybe the only downside of the design of this fight is some sequences in P2 were much easier than others, but nothing was undoable. You know what I mean? Like, and like from 60% to 0, like some setups were insanely hard and some were super easy. But maybe that's a good thing too, because like some of them have like a better lust window after it. I don't know. This is an A. The question is whether this is an S. When you're talking about S tier, you're saying this is one of the like top, like probably 3 or 4 mid-tier bosses in the last couple expansions. And I don't know if that's true. BFA specifically had some excellent mid-tier fights. It's high A at the least. Banger, 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 banger. We're going to say A. We're going to say A. Solid A. High A. Xy'mox in Sanctum. Not as good. Still pretty fun. I think the whole idea of using... like, the thing that I think they did really well on Sepulcher Xy'mox is... the thing that they brought through from the other fight, the main one, there's a couple of mechanics that they like repurposed, but the main one is the ports by porting between. I think the porting in the rings was really fucking cool and really fun to play around with throughout testing and live, because it was never really the same on testing. I don't know if it's a C, because I don't think it's a, but the rest of it besides the ports I feel like was lame. Like the going over to platforms thing was a cool idea. However, the fact that people had to AFK over there for like 10 plus seconds after they killed those ads, even if they waited to the last possible second, was really weak, I think. Like that alone, the fact that it's a fight that encourages AFKing and also kind of encourages damage stops sometimes, a little weak. I'm gonna say it's a C. I think that's, you guys are saying C in chat. It's a low B or a C. I'm actually gonna put it at C. Just because any fight that ever like kind of forces AFK moments, in my opinion, just could have been designed better. Moving on, what is this? So, it looks like a Sanctum boss. Is this like Soulrender or... Oh, no, it's Dausegne. I had a lot of fun planning for this fight because there was like this Door of Shadows tech you could use that we didn't end up doing. A few other guilds actually used that, where you could like you could play Venthyr for this fight and Door of Shadows over 2 rings every single time if you delayed the shield phases long enough. The boss loses health when you break her shield. What's not fun? I feel like the mythic integration where if you stack on anyone during the ring, you die. It stayed hard throughout farm. Like if you ever slacked off on this fight, you kind of just kept wiping. Like it's like, I think we killed this in 2 pulls or 3 pulls. Most guilds like 2 or 3 shot it, like the top guilds. But it's still just one of those fights where if you just like are kind of on autopilot, you'll just wipe to this fight. So it presented a challenge early. It's technically the second boss, but in the same way you could argue that like in Castle Nathria, Hungering Destroyer, Sun King, and Xy'mox were all the second boss because they were all technically potentially like able to be the second boss, but they were not all tuned that way. Xy'mox was not the second boss, right? Like Huntsman was clearly the boss you were intended to go to after Shriekwing. So I don't know if Dausegne is technically considered the second boss. I think Skolex was. So rating it for most 3rd to 4th bosses, I actually think it was really interesting to play. Maybe the only bad part of this is just like the ads dropping those puddles was just kind of annoying, not really fun. But that also encouraged you to hit the ads. Man, this it's definitely not S tier, but it's a solid B or A for sure. Is it as good as Xy'mox? The answer to that is no. So I'm gonna say high B and better than Eye of the Jailer. Correct. I think that's, so far I'm happy with how the relative, how this is working relatively by ranking these. What is the next boss? Anduin, right? Man, Anduin is going to be so polarizing, especially because lower difficulties will give you a different idea than the mythic version of this. Yeah, it's almost like S tier or D at the same time. Yeah, I think they did the concept of this fight is almost perfect. Like if you talk about theoretical fight design in the broad outline concept of Anduin, it's almost perfect. It's insanely well made. It's also the most nerfed boss of all time on Heroic. What Heroic was when it initially came out, which us and Echo killed, no other guild killed it, and then they like nerfed it. I think I wish I actually had the graph here. If someone wants to link me that, I'll pull it up later and Frank can edit it into the video. But the like actual picture of how much the fight was nerfed over the expansion was insane. Just gutted fight. But that being said, doing this on progression was so fun, but it is definitely plagued with the idea of binary pass-fail mechanics, and I understand why this boss was problematic, but I think lore-wise, the fact that it was like the Lich King and fucking just A-bombs going from side to side and ghouls and the downstairs phase and the soul mechanic outside, blasphemy, had like a Star Augur-like mechanic but didn't overdo it. I think the weakest thing on this fight design-wise was the kick ads. I think the kick ads were just like not really necessary, kind of lame, and they needed P2 to be different than P1. P3 could have been harder. This was also just one of the most hype world first kills of all time. So fun.
Oh my God! Yes, God! Let's go!
Like this, I'll always feel weird about Anduin. Not weird, but like happy. Because Anduin was killed at the same time like Denathrius was killed for world first in Castle Nathria. So like at the point where we killed Anduin in the race, which was only the 8th boss, was like usually the length that even a long race to world first goes. And so like the feeling of killing a boss like that at that point in the race was like, I feel like I've almost never been happier because it was just so elating and the boss was just super epic and the way it died was so cool. But then also like the few hours after that of pure despair with like, you know, that whole situation, which still I don't even like thinking about. It's fucking so annoying. I think it's S, dude. I think Anduin, I understand how it's polarizing as S or D, but I'm talking about on Mythic, and in a way, I'm kind of talking about like my experience with them. And I think it can't, like, it makes no sense to be A. It's either like S or it's bad. And I just think the design and the concept of this fight was too good to rate it any lower than this, even though the execution wasn't perfect. And even it was extremely hard, but like we killed this boss pretty fast. Like definitely one of this boss was just such a highlight to show how difficulty can be different for different guilds. You know what I mean? The challenges that a Race to World First guild has on a fight could be different than another guild. This is actually why I loved in Castle Nathria specifically that I worked with lower ranked guilds and raid led them and played with them. And I saw that like there are certain mechanics in this game that on a lesser coordinated team is something you don't even think about in a World First guild. It's just automatic. Like people going down at the right time or killing souls at the right time or getting your CCs when you're assigned to. Stuff like that is just stuff you don't think about at the highest level. But like when you just start adding a few people into your guild when you're like a fight where it's like you're as good as your weakest link and it has to do with consistently using abilities at the right time, that is just like guild's kryptonite. Most hard fights have like one or two things like this. Anduin, almost every mechanic just punished you for not being positioned correctly or doing something perfectly. And I know how that like really negatively affected a lot of guilds, killed a lot of guilds. But as my experience with this fight and doing, like, I just had so much fun with this encounter. So I'm going to rate it as S tier. I don't think it's the best fight of this expansion. I will rate bosses higher than this, but I think it deserves to be an S. Sorry, really long. I'm not going to spend that long on every fight. It's just this one kind of needs a lot of explaining. What is this? Is this Soulrender? Looks like Soulrender or Remnant. Oh, it's Fatescribe. Oh, yeah. Dude, does he almost get an S tier just because of his dumbass voice? The door opens. Like, that's actually the voice acting for this character. It always makes me laugh thinking about what Atlas said he was going to do. So Atlas kept on doing the door opens thing, just like a little anecdote about this fight. And we were at the complexity place, and like there's this like long line of bathrooms near the back, and that's where the caterer was. So the caterer would always just be like setting up our next meal back there, and they would just like take their breaks there outside like the bathroom area. And Atlas was practicing the door opens thing in the like bathroom, like he was because he was going to do it on stream for a bit. So he was practicing it in the bathrooms, and then like he came out of the bathroom, and like there was like the caterer was just sitting there. This lady was just sitting there and had been listening to him ripping the door opens like that in the bathroom, and he had to come out and like acknowledge that she heard him screaming like that in the bathroom for no reason. I always thought that's fucking hilarious. Okay. Fatescribe's gonna get a pretty low ranking because it potentially could have been super interesting, but they made it completely trivial by the fact that you could have moved in one direction the entire time. Also, it's a really bad DPS. You're gonna notice this as a theme in Sanctum, is it's a really bad damage stop kind of fight. You're incentivized to kind of hold damage at the end of phases and kind of cheese it. Big problem in Sanctum. Really not fun to do in farm. Definitely also a fight that's just too carried by weak auras, and I think weak auras are an excellent addition to this game, but anytime you get into like computational fight-defining weak auras that you have to have, I just think that shit's lame. Like, I just don't think they should have mechanics like that, because it's just not fun to complete them, and it's just done by a fucking robot. There's just way better ways to have mechanics like that, and that was definitely the case in Heroic, so... It's almost a D. It's a C or a D. It's basically just a glass half empty or half full thing. The cool thing about Fatescribe is I think the ring idea in general, broad concept, very cool, not executed well. I'm thinking low C. There are some Ds, and this is not one of them. I'm going to say low C. Yeah. What is this fight? Is this Guardian? Okay. This is actually going to be a pretty hot take. I think people are probably not going to agree with me. I had the highest hopes for Guardian of the first ones. Or is that even what this boss is called? I had the highest hopes for this because we just came off of a boss called Sludgefist in Castle Nathria. which, first of all, having that single targety kind of end near the end of the raid boss, I think is one of the coolest things that Blizzard has ever accomplished, and they're usually really good at it. And I was really skeptical about Sludgefist because I'm like, man, it's so hard to make this boss well. It's either going to get shit on because of damage amps and you're just going to kill it too early and it's going to be super easy and people won't like it, or it's going to be just impossibly hard and waiting to be nerfed because it's so straightforward. Sludgefist was everything. Maybe this is a little bit of an insight into what I will rank Sludgefist later, but it was almost perfect for a like single target fight. You were constantly threatened. The damage amp really mattered. You could kind of do some stuff to get longer damage amps near the end of the fight. It was just so good. So my hopes for Guardian were through the roof. And initially on testing, they gave you that idea. You could kind of fill up whatever battery you wanted. You could like, if you wanted to like mix up your timings in the fight, you could like be generating battery energy in the second battery instead of the first, because maybe you wanted the first battery to be way less long than the second. And also, they didn't nerf purging protocols, so you kind of had a really cool idea of like whether you would bring in enough healers to live through enough purging protocols, and you could kind of move the enrage around. And they had all these like super movable elements that was like perfect for how you'd want to encounter a fight like this. There's multiple ways to do it. There would be multiple strats. You could overheal or underheal, and both had their total advantages for sure. And then after all of that, they buffed purging protocol to where doing more than 4 of them was basically impossible, and really and it was borderline not even worth ever going past 3. And that was just kind of lame. And then that basically put the fight on rails, and it was no longer this movable enrage. It was just on rails. And then they also made it so you got exactly the amount of energy you needed for every single battery, and it just made sense to go in a line, and it was all the same. And they basically took this potentially really cool fight that, you know, came right after Sludgefist, and they did Sludgefist perfect. I had such high hopes for it, and it really, really let me down. And this was one of the most bland, boring, super easy single target fights they could have ever made, and it was near the end of the raid. And really anticlimactic to fight right after Painsmith. I'm going to put this fight, I think I'm going to put it in a D. And the reason why is I think as a fight alone, pound for pound, I don't think it's a terrible fight. It's a fine single target fight. But what this boss could have been was fucking incredible. And they made it, and the design decisions they made after testing to this fight made it one of the least enjoyable bosses to progress, and a major, major letdown for a fight that late in the raid. So that's how I feel about it. I feel like I know tuning is not, I said tuning isn't going to matter too much in my stuff, but this one was just too important of something to not mention it or have it be a big factor on this specific boss. Halondrus. This is one of the best fights they've ever made. It's hard to rate it up against end bosses, but even if you were to rate this fight against second to last bosses, which is not what it was going up against, it's going up a mid-tier boss, this would be one of the best end bosses of all time. It's possible pound for pound Halondrus is the best raid boss of all time. I can tell you half of my guild would actually tell you that Halondrus was their favorite fight they've ever progressed. It had everything. I mean, I don't even really know what else there is to say. I mean, it was one of the most watchable fights. Playing it was insanely fun, but frustrating at the same time, but in all the right ways. I mean, as close to a perfect fight as you could ever make. Insane fight. Shriekwing. So talk about first bosses, like bad first bosses, good first bosses. I think the worst thing about Shriekwing is the fact that the boss just goes AFK for a minute, but it was also presented a decent level of challenge. I mean, it's definitely like, that's the only downside to Shriekwing, right? The singular only downside to Shriekwing at all is the fact that you don't just hit it the whole time. And those kind of always stink. But this one doesn't stink. Like Shriekwing is, you never are like, damn, we're doing Shriekwing. Like Shriekwing kind of bangs. First boss, it's not an A, because there are some examples where like first bosses are really fucking good, but it's a high B. I agree with it. High B. Hungering Destroyer. I love this fight. I think Hungering Destroyer is like early-ish to mid-tier fight. It was a banger. Like you had to like not cleave with lines. The miasma thing could have very easily been a really shitty mechanic, and it just wasn't. A little bit of a detriment because of the fight's design, it made Spirit Link a little too powerful, which definitely affected a lot of lower ranked guilds especially. But like you could do so many strats in this fight. The one that everyone ended up doing was like, everyone does this one now, I think. It's like this strat, right? Where like everyone stands on the 4 markers, and then like raid leaders could totally carry the hell out of this fight. And then you're like you're only assigned to like heal the person that's on your marker. You get assigned to a marker stuff. But like people did very different things. Like our first thing on progression was like, melee generally were like over here, ranged were like spread out over here, bosses in the middle, and then like these beams were always to the left, these beams were to the right. You always like move to the edge of the room if you had a beam. And it just like kind of made it really simple. Everyone from the beginning had the like gateway here and then have the consume area happen at this side of the room. But then we largely YOLO'd our stacks. We're a big YOLO guild. We just had players do this. Well, the reason we YOLO'd it was I was going to micromanage all of it. Like literally just play the fight, YOLO it, and I will hard micromanage it, but our weak aura didn't work, and this was like a 1 to 2 to 3 pull boss. So we just ended up YOLOing it because the weak aura wasn't optimized. But yeah, so this boss was YOLOable, able to have a strat, and just overall, excellent fight. Not going to spend too much time on it. Hungering Destroyer. Hey, who's this guy? Is this Huntsman Altimor? Is Huntsman kind of a sick second boss? It's like kind of sick. It's super easy, but also hard. Like, here's what I like about this, is because on Huntsman, a lot of people did the immunity strat, but a lot of people didn't. Like, the one you guys are referring to is like this, right? And then like, this was our strat. And then like, there's like an immunity person here, the boss is tanked here. These shades go like over here, and then you just tank the bosses here, and then you just have an immunity go off at X every time. If you look at it like this, I think that's bad, but then like, look at Echo strat, right? Like, Echo strat was this. They had like no immunities basically involved, and you just had like 3 groups, right? You had like basically a general camp of people at this marker, a general camp of people at this, and a general camp of people at this. It was more healing intensive, but you never had to deal with immunities at all. And basically the person who got targeted would like go behind, and then the line would go out from the boss to them from here, and they would, you know, the star group would just soak it. And then like, it would be like really, and then they would just like group heal around here. And then, yeah, it was like, you didn't have to use immunities, and you could one-shot this boss no matter what. But then, like, the fact that you had, like, a damage amp on the ads, had, like, a little CC action. It was a little annoying that some soulbinds broke CCs a lot of the times. But I think it's an A. I think Huntsman's an A-tier second boss. But it is kind of bugged. Because even to this day, like, the boss is supposed to get an aura that increases the damage he takes by 100%, and he still doesn't do it. To this day, it's still bugged. They said in Fated they made a change to make it happen more likely. Is it as good as... Is Shriekwing as good of a first boss as Huntsman is a second boss? I think the answer to that's yes. Yeah, it's a B. Yeah, we'll think about that later. Is this the Jailer? Young Money Jailer? It's impossible to have a take about Jailer. Like, I feel like I would need to, like, delegate this to you all. I want you all to raid Jailer. I'm going to tell you why. We've have more of a commitment to winning next raid than any time before. I mean, it's, like, not even close, like, the vibe within the guild about doing everything you can to win, which we've always been, you know, very fun and stuff like that. But it's so hard to tell what things went wrong on Jailer that were due to us having fundamental issues with decision-making, or how much of it was the fact that we had been somewhere for 30 days and everyone wanted to leave and the food was terrible and we were swapping hotels mid-raid and we were lagging an hour a day. Like, literally fucking miserable, miserable situation. But at the same time, the exact same thing is we're doing this boss like that. So, like, I'm only remembering Jailer as we did it, and no one was having any fun that entire week, even when we were ahead. So I feel like my take on the boss is bad. Like, obviously the bug happened at the end of the fight, but it wasn't killed like that first. So, like, can you really hold the bug against it? I guess kind of. I'm taking myself out of Jailer. I think my brain and our entire vibe and that event was so fried by the time we got to this boss and actually did it that I feel like I won't be able to have a correct opinion on this fight. So we'll see. Pull. I'm going to pull Jailer. I'll eat my yogurt while it happens. What are your all's reasons? Let me read a few. LOS mechanic hard capped at C. I feel that. Although I don't think the LOS on Jailer was that bad, but I think LOS mechanics in general are pretty shit. Pets never worked correctly on it. The last phase was bugged on purpose for months by almost literally every guild except for one. Most guilds, even Echo, took like a month to re-kill this boss. Like, you just didn't even pull it. Although it's like end of expansions, like who knows. It didn't have tier. Yeah, we didn't forget to mention loot, but like Jailer, it does matter a little bit that Jailer was like one of the weirdest bosses of all time because it was the end heroic boss that like no one ever did. The stats of who killed Jailer were hilarious because there was no reason to do it. The gear outside of plate wearers really wasn't good enough at the time, and it just didn't drop a tier token, which was just like super controversial. So you guys voted C, very close to a B though, and I think I see both arguments, but I think having it at C is definitely fine. Kel'Thuzad's dog shit. Actually, interestingly enough, the version of this boss that they made after they basically buffed it mid-farm because it was so broken is actually not a bad fight at all. But things that persist now and persisted then is the RNG of where things spawn was really stupid. Like sometimes waves of ads in the first phase were like really hard to deal with because they were super spread out, and sometimes they were stacked. In the intermission, you guys who have done the fight, isn't it insane? It's insane to think that if you get the A-bombs, when you get a spawn like this, the difficulty of this phase is like a third of what it is when you get a spawn like this. And I think that is the fact that it ever went live like that and the spawns weren't static is terrible. Absolute dog shit design. Just based on where mobs spawn, the phase's difficulty is increased by probably more than double. What a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, obviously this fight was fucking heavily cheesed, and it's a second. Remember, like the whole point of the tier list is you're rating things for where they are in the raid, and you're talking about rating Kel'Thuzad against not even Rygelon and Halondrus, which like Rygelon is the correct comparable thing there. Halondrus is by far the best mid-raid tier, but you could also compare it against End and second to last. You're comparing this against Fallen Avatar, against Manaroth, you know, Mithrax, Zakul. Like this, I mean, it just gets windmill dunked by every boss that is in its position. I mean, Kel'Thuzad was an embarrassment, especially with how epic this boss was in general to WoW. Which, like, I think that matters. Like, you're bringing fucking Kel'Thuzad back for the first time since Nax, right? A former end boss, and it's that? Like, I don't know, man. That's fucking rough. What is next? Sire Denathrius. S tier. Not better than Halondrus. Halondrus is the best boss this expansion. But, like, Sire Denathrius is a fucking banger. The only negative to this is you lag in P1, but you could just change your strat and make enough ads to where you don't lag, which is what you had to do in week 1. Actually, surprisingly enough, depending on what guild you were, because this is a huge detriment. Depending on your instance server and what region you were in, you could realistically lag on 12 ads or like 20 or 25 or 30. And it totally depended on, like some guilds could not do more than 15 without lagging, which was us. And some guilds were doing it in the same week, same lockout, and they were doing 30 ads with 0 lag. And it had nothing to do with the fucking abilities you were using. The comp was basically the same. That's fucking bad. But talk about a fight that most fights when are killed world first, guilds eventually by the end of farm, late cutting edge kills, usually are much less than that because the difficulty diminishes. But Denathrius found the perfect way to never get easier. Like, this almost never happens, where, like, kills, even at the end of farm, the average kill was actually higher than the world first kills. And the main reason was, even though the damage check wasn't there anymore, you could not kill this boss until everyone in your raid consistently learned to live Massacre, until the worst player or the worst few players in your group learned to consistently not die to Massacre. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Massacre is one of the best mechanics they've ever made. P3 was awesome. Thematically, insanely cool fight. Had 2 dicks, Donnie 2D. That's S tier fight. Probably the second best fight this tier, besides Halondrus. Maybe Rygelon is better. Yeah, also a sex fiend. He says some deplorable shit in that raid. Okay, who is this? Inerva? This boss is bad. This boss had the potential to be so cool. I spent so much time thinking about this boss and like where you would like press the canister to like make yourself not get a spinny red lines for this wave, and like the potions wouldn't bounce yet. But they made the fight in a way that it never made sense. Like the concept of the fight in each phase filling the canisters, and then you having the ability to build your own fight and really like drain them is really cool. That's like a top tier as fuck. Inerva had the potential. This is just like Guardian. The potential of Inerva was so high, and it's a wing end boss. Who are you comparing Inerva to in this expansion? You're comparing it to like right around Painsmith or maybe Soulrender, and you're comparing it to Lihuvim and Halondrus. It's a wing end fight. That is what you're comparing it to. I mean, terrible. Literally. I mean, it could have been so good. They took the canister thing and they just made it so if you ever drained one, it went into the other ones, which just meant you never drained. So, or like barely ever drained. So they just took the mechanic out of the fight and made it non-interactive. Terrible. D tier or low C? Thinking low C. It's not as bad as these two. Lihuvim's interesting. So we have an interesting situation with this boss because progressing this boss was very weird for us. Like everyone else, there are fights where, let's just say we kill Lihuvim. Someone's going to come in, and when we took 8 hours to kill Lihuvim, they're going to kill it in 2 hours because they have the strat. As opposed to Halondrus. If someone watched us kill Halondrus and started progression on it, they would take just as long as if they were doing it on their own, basically. Because it's just mechanically way more difficult. Lihuvim's a strat boss. So I feel like, and I'm going to rate Lihuvim higher than most people are, because literally every guild in the world besides ours. Only interaction with Lihuvim was using our strat, at least initially, and then probably some different strats later. Like in the first month, everyone just used our strat and just killed the fight, and it was pretty easy. For us, this was really fun. This is Kingaroth. This is so many fights in the past where you get to choose your fight. You get to kill a prototype, and then you don't get that ad, and then you have to deal with a more powerful version of all of those ads later. That is really cool, and we had an insanely fun time progressing this, including the Blizzard, like, double-taking, hey, we don't want you to kill 2 ads at a time, so we went and stopped while they waited to fix it, and then they were like, lol, just kidding, not actually doing that, and then we went in and killed it after they fixed the ads, not running all the way to you and casting from across the room. But even regarding that, this was still insanely fun to figure out. And what I dislike about streaming progression and the fact that no one does like blind rating in WoW, this is a prime example of like actually doing a fight and figuring it out on your own versus watching a video. Your like impression of Lihuvim is totally different by following a strat than figuring it out, because fights like this are genuinely insanely fun to figure out and some of the best designed fights they make. But they only really make it for, in this case, literally the first guild to kill them. I'm going to rate this exactly 1 higher than I think everyone else in the world would rate this. I would think most people are going to rate Lihuvim as a B or a C. It's definitely not a D. And I am probably going to rate it as a high B. It's not an A. Hopefully that perspective helps you understand why I think higher of this fight. Why are you putting all the bosses you beat Echo on as A tier boss, but the bosses you got absolutely smoked on is low ranked? Dude, that's so good. What is this? Lords of Dread? This is gonna be pretty low. Oh yeah, Echo beat us to this fight, so it's definitely a D. Pretty low, and the main reason why is for the longest time, passing these green things onto you disoriented you. Which is just like I guess thematically, like the swarming mist or whatever, like, what? That's terrible. And if you guys remember, this fight for a while, until they changed it, did not just give you a damage amp in the swarm phase. It picked random fucking abilities in the game and made them get a massive damage increase and other things didn't. So even if your class was a good 2-target class or the best one in the game, if your specific ability did not do extra damage in that phase, you were not used on this fight, or you were not good enough on this fight. And in my opinion, that is a terrible design decision. They ended up changing it, which verifies the terrible design decision fact, because they came to that conclusion on their own. But the fact that it ever went live like that or with the disorient is a major fumble of the bag. That being said, overall, pretty cool fight to do. The Among Us phase was pretty weak aura required at a high level, although you could communicate it, and we did for a while in like Heroic and Mythic. So the good parts of this is that it was a pretty well-made fight that didn't get tested. And also, big difference in melee and range. The difficulty of melee and range in this fight is like 2 different universes. Ranged is just an absolute fucking hellhole, and melee is just chillin', easy as fuck. But it's a unique fight, and the Among Us mechanic was really cool. It's not a D. It's not a D, but putting it higher than C would be crazy. How does it compare to the other things on this list? Is it better than Inerva? Yes. But it has way more problematic than Inerva. I didn't rate Jailer. Is it better than Xy'mox? It's weird. It just depends on how... It depends on how highly you value the fact that they chose to disorient you and you passed a buff, and also chose to... I honestly feel like, and I'm not kidding, the disorient thing and the fact that you didn't actually have a damage amp during the swarm, but it was only specific random abilities, and even really good AoE and 2-target classes weren't good because they were randomly selected, legit makes this go down 2 letter grades. Like, actually 2 letter grades. I think it's C at the most because of that. I think that's like a terrible, terrible thing. Yeah, and it's like a near the end of the fight, so you're comparing it against like Sludgefist. You're comparing it against like the best second and third to last boss equivalents. And I guess you could, even though I would give Blizzard the benefit of the doubt and say that Rygelon is probably what they envisioned to be the second to last boss. You can definitely tell because the difficulty of Rygelon was just infinitely higher than Lords of Dread. So yeah, if you rate this as a second to last boss, it's legit D. But if you rate it as like third, fourth to last boss, it's a little bit higher. C is the right choice. What is next? Is this Painsmith? This is also a polarizing one. I want to say Painsmith is an S tier fight. It's like the best just dodge and mechanic thing that they've ever made. But I also want to put it in A just because this fight had terrible lag problems. But I think they fixed, so this was actually 2 weeks after it was killed for the first time. They made the animations line up with the actual damage events. So only a few guilds actually dealt with this. So I'm going to say the majority of people's mythic opinion is not with that lag shit in mind. I want to say Painsmith is an S tier boss, but is it better than Anduin, Sire, or Halondrus? The answer to that is probably no. What else about this fight? Might be better than Anduin. Anduin and Painsmith is a push. I would just put Anduin ahead, I think, because Anduin was just like way more fucking epic. It was just way more epic. Not even the kill thing I was referencing earlier. Just the whole fight design was so much more complete. Painsmith in a way is just kind of the same thing the whole time. I think Anduin's better than Painsmith. It also had damage stops. Didn't mention that. Whatever though. Moving on. Prototype Pantheon is a pile of shit. It's a middle of the raid tier fight, and it's just mechanic vomit. None of this stuff really makes sense or goes together. This fight, Sepulcher would have been a better instance if this fight just wasn't in it at all. I think this fight is horrific. It's fun to like AoE in a raid at the end and like kill it really fast, but like I think this fight is horrible. Horrible fight. It's not worse than Kel'Thuzad, and Guardian is better than it. So okay. What is this? Is this this is Remnant, right? This is Remnant of Kel'Thuzad? Remnant of Ner'zhul, that's his name. Dude, I've been saying it. I feel like Sanctum's mid-tier boss is kind of fucked, man. They kind of fucked real hard. Now, they ended up making this fight better in the future. So I would say Remnant is a high A. However, as a mid-tier raid boss, I think the spell queuing thing on this fight was a major problem. Like, you got a really quick, easy kill of this if you just happened to, like, push it below 30% during a blast, or during a, like, knockback. And then it just didn't cast it for like almost the entire phase. And like having to play around that was like really, really dookie. But then they ended up fixing this for most people. Also, there was a couple other weird things on this fight. Like there's actually this is really interesting. And I think there was one guild that was actually smart enough to do this. I think it was BDG was the only guild I knew that did this. Forgive me if another guild figured it out and I'm not remembering it. But like what we did on this fight is we just had our weak aura was, there would just be like 2 bars counting down at the top of your screen. It would just have the 2 people's names and it would be counting down the duration. And the 3 colors would be green, yellow, or red. So red were classes that could not really deal with the fact that they were getting mass dispelled and knocked off the platform. So paladins, unless they had bubble, but if they bubbled, it dispelled it. So paladins were like the worst case scenario. A couple other classes were worst case scenario, like priests, shamans. However, they could usually have goblin. So basically, green meant you were a class when you got mass dispelled. So if you were here or here, if you were a green class, you were the person who was priority to go to the back, because the first person didn't have to do anything. First person, you mass dispel, and this person goes this way, and this person gets mass dispelled this way, depending on the timing that it goes off. And then that way you just never had to worry about it. So usually you had like yellow people, it depended on a CD. Green meant they were good to go. Mages, warlocks, monks, people who could transcend or port every single time. You can probably, warriors, you guys all know who these classes are. Shadow Step, stuff like that. So this was our idea, and it worked really well. Killed the boss really fast. Here is what some other guild did. Is some other guild, BDG, figured out that this was actually done by GUID. So they mass dispelled, but they always, because like if you didn't know the GUID, you didn't know which one of these was actually going to get mass dispelled first. But based on like GUID, you would know, which I'm not going to go into like super detail into what that is because it is kind of confusing. It's just like an indicator on your character within your guild that the only way to reset it is to like transfer accounts or servers. And it like sometimes very randomly raid mechanics go off of your GUID being high or lower. And they figured out a weak aura to detect that, and they knew who was going to be on it. So they always just had the person with the higher or lower GUID, whatever it is, to go to the outside. And when you mass dispelled it as a priest, it would always have the person, if they were facing away, stay on the platform. And I just think that is the coolest shit ever, and how they figured that out is like really smart. But yeah, so that was the thing. Anyways, just cool anecdote I think you'd enjoy from the fight. I think Remnant's a banger. Remnant mid-tier boss, way up there. Super cool. I think it's an A. What is the next fight here? Rygelon? Oh my god. I mean, probably only second to Halondrus. Here's the argument for Halondrus over Rygelon. Is Halondrus is a mid-tier fight, so naturally when you're raiding it, you're raiding it against other mid-tier wing-end bosses, and in which it is by far the best boss of that of all time. But it's so good that even in that case, you could say that it was better or the best second-to-last boss or end boss of all time. Like, Halondrus just clears every fight ever. Like, it's just, for its spot in the raid relative, it's just too good. To where, if you were to basically have Halondrus and Rygelon both as second-to-last bosses, I genuinely, I think Rygelon is just as good as Halondrus. It's just that you have to compare it against other second-to-lasts. Rygelon was killed in the first week. When I was in Malta with Now, we were just kind of like talking about the raid a little bit. and we were out on a boat with Joker D and Sophie. And I was like, dude, I think it's crazy you all 4-healed that fight. Like, I think it would have taken us a long time to figure out how to 4-heal that fight, and I don't know if we could have. We were just playing more sloppy. And then he was like, yeah, we were pretty sure we were under the impression that, like, we did not have the damage to kill 5 healers. So 2 guilds both killed this within a few hours of each other, and one killed it 5 healing, not thinking they could 4 heal, and the other guild killed it 4 healing, not thinking they had the damage to 5 heal it, and they were both killed in that amount of time. And it was super fun, massive bangs fucking going off. Like, it's a big burn at the end, super high intensity healing and damage the entire time, insanely precise, but also so short. I personally would want to rate this a little lower because it took us an extra 4 hours to kill this boss, literally because it had a variable in rage. I showed this previously, but we had the damage on the second pull of the day to kill this boss was a 7-11 in rage, which is what it is now. But the boss randomly, based on we still don't know what did it, it would make the enrage like 7 seconds earlier, which is what we had on our second pull, and it would have died at like 7:08. And that was like really frustrating, and I feel like totally out of our control. And they ended up fixing this, I think, before even any other guild killed it. So, but I still am not going to lower its rating. Rygelon, Sire Denathrius is a better boss than Rygelon, but Sire Denathrius is an end boss, and Rygelon is a second to last boss. If you made the argument that Rygelon was the best penultimate boss ever in the game, I would not argue with you. I think that's probably correct. So I'm going to put it up here behind Halondrus. I mean, just a fucking turbo banger fight. Insane fight. And the fact that this wasn't tested, oh my god, dude. Fucking banger. Same with Halondrus. Okay, moving on. Skolex. I would say this is a true second boss. Skolex is I think Skolex is just as much as Sun King, Xy'mox, and Huntsman could have all been the second boss. Huntsman was the second boss. Same thing in this. DeSausage, Xy'mox, and Skolex were the second boss, but Skolex was the second boss. I don't think it's lower than B. I mean, it's a single target fight. He goes underground. I think it's like pretty uninspired, like range, just sit out in range and like rotate baiting the like sand blasts on them and melee just run in circles. It's a pretty lame fight overall. Having to stack for the thing and being able to cancel wretches was pretty cool. It's pretty basic. I mean, it's a second boss, so like it probably would have a different rank based on what role you are. Like I bet melee would rate this very low. What do you guys think, chat? I can't decide. Chat poll. Big fight between B and C right now. Like comparing it to Huntsman, for example, Huntsman is a way better second boss and Huntsman is a B. So I'm thinking it's closer to C. I wonder how much me just saying that influenced the votes. Damn, I'm out here interfering. You guys put it as B, I'm not gonna argue with it. It's about to end and B is certainly gonna win. Unless literally 90 people vote. That would be unlikely. Okay, it has to be low B. Sure. Sludgefist. Sludgefist is a good boy. S tier fight. Question is where it goes. It's comparable to Painsmith and Anduin. Basically the same spot in the raid. Same idea for the fight. Denathrius is an end boss. Rygelon's second to last, and Halondrus is just better. So it doesn't go above Denathrius. Or does it go above Denathrius? I mean, it's above Anduin and Painsmith, definitely. Question is Sludgefist a better mid-raid boss than Denathrius was an end boss? That is fucking tight. I mean, Sludgefist is such a giga eye-level boss. Like, us doing this week 1 is just, like, dude, look at this fucking... Look at how this boss died. We had to kill it from 4% to 0 while our health is doing this.
Yes!
Let's go! Dude, like, this fight was fucking sick! It was so good, okay? But then, like, if you had more gear, it wasn't that close. So, like, it's less epic. But still, you kind of had to just not kill each other with chains over the whole fight. What do you guys think, chat? Dude, Painsmith doesn't deserve to be at the end of S, but I think every boss here was better than Painsmith. I mean, the only real argument is Anduin. I think Anduin's gonna go below Painsmith. Anduin was just more problematic. Anduin was more epic, but just more problematic than Painsmith. Painsmith's better than Anduin. You guys agree with that? I think this is the right choice. Painsmith's above Anduin. I think Sludgefist being here is right. I don't know if I could say it's better than Denathrius. Dude, who the fuck is this? It's a Sanctum boss, clearly, but like, is this Soulrender? Dude, does he have steam coming off his head like that? Is that real? Where's his hat? Doesn't he have a hat on? He's looking goofy as fuck. Wait, he does.
Hello, everyone, and
Huh. Weird. Okay. Soulrender. I'll give you my take of this fight. Really good. Really, again, Sanctum had very, very good mid-raid bosses. The thing that I felt was cool about this was killing this for the first time, especially because it was super overtuned. They had to nerf it after we spent a bunch of time on it. They basically made the damage more consistent instead of happening in big bursts, and they nerfed the chain damage a little bit. But I mean, I feel like the idea of the fight is very cool. It's a dance fight, Hygen the Unclean-esque. They accomplished that well. They give you a damage amp on ads. But like, here's the thing. When we were doing this boss and we were looking for boss damage, we had everyone just AoEing ads to get them done as soon as possible. And then like the way we killed it was we made everyone stop AoEing except for like the most efficient class or two. So like people could have done more AoE, but like you just wanted the most efficient class to do it, and then everyone else just focus on the boss. And that allowed us to kill it. So like it seemed like an AoE meme fight, but really just like most AoE meme fights, single target is still by far the most important thing. It's high B or it's an A. Soulrender's really fucking good. It's crazy how much Sanctum fell off, dude. It's crazy how much it fell off. It was just like all the way through the middle of the raid, like legit, like Tarragrue, the I, 9, or Tarragrue, I, the 9, Remnant, and Soulrender are like all B's to A's. And Painsmith is an S, and then it just fucking falls off a cliff. Crazy the fumble, man. Stone Legion Generals. Damn. Stone Legion Generals definitely stinks. I mean, talk about this fight being dog shit. Did you guys watch that charity race? We chose, one of the things we could do in the charity race was we could apply 4 affixes to any boss of our choosing. So we decided to do Stone Legion. Turns out it's a little unfortunate because Stone Legion came back after being bugged as fuck for so long to be bugged again. Where if you got the barrier, the protoform barrier affix on that fight, which we chose to add to it for damage, if you kill the protoform barrier in the intermission, it kills Lord Renathal, and you can no longer phase out of the intermission. So the fight wasn't killable. Dunk Ben, then Shaq after.
He's dead. Oh yeah, he's dead. Go again.
Ben.
Sure.
We don't
have an
wake
NPC.
on.
Yeah, we can have dunk.
He'll respawn.
Well, I guess it was killable if you just let it go off every time and almost kill you. But I mean, that's probably gonna make you fight anyway. So just to give you an idea of that, this fight's just an absolute fucking... They fixed it now. They fixed it after the charity thing. But yeah, everything... Okay, so the spell queuing, honestly, is annoying to progress. They fixed this a long time ago. But was really fun as a raid leader because you had like 3 things on your screen and you just had to remember what the priority was. And that was like a skill difference, and I liked that. But them fixing it was better for the game. But even after they fixed almost everything in this fight being bad, it was still just a extremely anticlimactic, lame fight. When you 2-shot the last phase after spending so much time in the other phases, that's just, no fight should be like that. It should always progress and be harder as it goes on. That's like good fight design. Like having the end of the fight be a joke makes no sense. The intermissions being the hardest part, but also spending a lot of time AFKing, like what is that? And then maybe the worst thing of all, that is still the way to this day, is phasing out of the first intermission was largely dependent on, I forget the name of the character, but a character flies around and knocks commandos out of the air. And for some reason, they coded that so poorly. Yeah, General Draven with his little joystick up there. That guy sometimes would knock down 5 ads in 20 seconds or 5 ads in a minute. That's how bad it was. Just pure... Remember how bad we talked about KT RNG was? Which, based on where these ads spawned? I mean, like, there would be times where you would just wipe in that intermission because the game just didn't work. Stone Legion Generals is terrible. And one of the major... Again, this expansion had so many great fights, but the fact that 2 penultimate bosses were totally dog shit is pretty bad. But is it better than Prototype? Dude, I honestly think... Well, Kel'Thuzad's definitely the worst fight in the expansion for where it was, for sure. Yeah, it's probably better than Prototype. What are the plus sides of Stone Legion? It's kind of like a Mythic Plus boss. Dude, being a 2-minute AoE class, Windwalker, Marksman Hunter, stuff like that on this fight when it was live was like insanely fun, man. You just fucking cranked. It was super fun to play. This is my favorite boss to do to help raid lead guilds. Max, have your guild done the bop tech on Stone Legion to avoid the annoyance around the commando mobs? Yeah, we did that, and then we were planning on doing it in the charity race, and then they told us 5 minutes before it started that we couldn't do it. Fuck yeah. Yeah, Stone Legion overall very bad. What is this? Sun King. Healer fights. Healer fights are... usually fine for like mid-tier early raid fights. I think it's cool to like lust P2 and like heal them really fast. But like even healers aren't like looking forward to this. It's not a D, but like, can we not even just spend too much time thinking about, can we all agree on like a low C somewhere in there? Okay, so Inerva is a better fight than Sun King, but Inerva is a wing end boss and is still deeply problematic. Like, the reason why I have Inerva below this one, and it's not the lowest C, is because Inerva just is such a letdown for what that fight could have been. Sylvanas. Man, Sylvanas is like so polarizing because I feel like Sylvanas would be rated higher in people's minds if it didn't come after Guardian, Fatescribe, and Kel'Thuzad, the fucking holy trinity of dog shit. Sylvanas Phase 1 and Phase 3 are two of the very best end boss phases ever made. P1 Sylvanas is a fucking masterpiece. An absolute masterpiece. Phase 3 Sylvanas is very, very good. P2's a little long in Mythic, but it's notably way better in Mythic than it is in Heroic. And all of the damage kind of matters. Yeah, okay, I don't think P1 Sylvanas' design was bad because Moonkins happened to be so much better than every other class at spread AoE like that. I don't think that's like a fight problem as much as it is a class design issue, because like some classes were very good at that fight that weren't Moonkins in P1, right? Ellie Shamans, Hunters. Also, you have to stop damage in P1. Not when you killed that boss initially. You had to like make sure it was just right. I think Sylvanas is A. I think Sylvanas gets too much flack. Mythic made P2 way better. P1 and P3 bang. Dude, I think I have to put this at B because of Nori DCing. I'm just kidding. God, I can play games for 20 years and a DC will never feel worse than that. That's a fucking rough one. What the fuck is this? Is this the Tarragrue? Shout out Tarragrue, bro. Actually, shout out Tarragrue. You knew at the beginning of this expansion, they were going to do an anima power boss. They were going to fucking do it. And thank God it was at the beginning of a raid. And honestly, the fight was great. It was a great first boss. It was good. Minor annoyance is parse freaks in every guild would like take forever to pull this boss because they had to go re-roll their powers. Or even for non-parse freaks, you would summon someone in who showed up to raid on time or 10 minutes late, and you'll summon them, and unironically, even though you'll still kill the boss, they would turn around and run and loot all 4 things, which would waste 2 minutes per player. And that kind of matters. That is like a little bit of the fight design. Like, that was pretty fucking annoying. Like, I think this boss would almost be like a half a tier higher or higher up in its own tier if just like once you killed all 4 mobs and you went into the boss room and reset it one time, it just put all 4 anima orbs right outside the boss room or inside the edge of the boss room. I mean, dude, the amount of hours saved of people's lives if they would have done that. Tarragrue's A minimum. It's the best first boss of the expansion. It's not, is it an S tier first boss? Dude, fuck, we might have to do a little history lesson here. Is Tarragrue the best first boss ever? That's the only way we would put it in S, I think. Or is it even like top 3? I don't think so. But also, I'm having trouble thinking about what other first bosses even are. Let me just look at like first bosses real quick. Let's just look last 3 expansions. Emerald Nightmare, Nathendra, fine first boss, probably about the same level as Tarragrue. Nighthold, Scorpion, nice little AoE boss. Tomb, Goroth was fine. Okay, yeah, no, this is not exceptional. Like, literally every boss I just mentioned before even looking at BFA and Shadowlands. Like, is it better than, like, Immersius? Yeah. But, like, is it like, transcendent, insane first boss? No. I'd say Tarragrue's A, though. Just because I knew they were going to make an anima power boss, and I thought it was going to be annoying, and it wasn't. So, beautiful. Council of Blood. Council of Blood kind of fucks. Again, the issue of like Moonkin's padding and star falling a lot isn't doing the dance and then getting a buff from it is good. The fact that you had multiple ways to kill it and in Mythic, multiple guilds actually killed this at the correct time or killed it using different strategies. Thematic, cool fight. I mean, they did a dance bit on a fight and it wasn't ass. Jumping with Dancing Fever as a healing mechanic was cool. I think this is a minimum B. Is Council of Blood an A? I think Council of Blood's really good. I think it's a low A. Yeah, ahead of Hungering. I still am a little weird about Hungering being in this. I don't know if Hungering is an A tier boss. It made sense earlier in the video, but I feel like now that I've put other bosses in A, it's just definitely not as good for its place in the raid as some of these other ones. But let's drop Hungering down a little bit and put Council at the end of A tier. I actually agree with that. What is this? The 9. Bro, the 9 fucking owns. The 9 is such a good early boss that it makes you wish that they would have used the same concept for the 9 and made it later in the raid. Like, could you imagine a like second or third to last boss version of the 9? It would be insane. They could have made all the mechanics on this fight that exist so much harder and so many more possibilities. It would have been so good. Dude, this is, dude, I think the 9 might be like one of the best early raid bosses in such a long time. But I don't know if I'm that passionate about it to put it in S. It's definitely an A. Like bare minimum, it's A. Was the 9 a better early boss than Soulrender was a mid? Yes. Was the 9 a better early boss than Remnant was a mid? Yes. Was the 9 a better early mid raid fight than Castle Nathria's Xy'mox was? Both of them are early to mid. They're actually directly competing with each other. I don't think so. Xy'mox is better. OG Xy'mox is better. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. Okay, one more boss before we actually rate the raids. Vigilant Guardian. So I want to point out that I think Vigilant Guardian is not D. People are going to say D. Okay, you have to take Heroic out of your mind. I think Vigilant Guardian on Heroic and Normal might be one of the worst first bosses, or the worst one they've ever made. Like way up there with Hellfire Assault. On Mythic, this fight is miles better than it is on Normal and Heroic. And for that, I think it can't be a D. I mean, maybe you could argue that like on Heroic and Normal, it's literally worse than Kel'Thuzad, but on Mythic, it's higher D. It's probably still D. It honestly is probably still D. It's like high D. No, I think, dude, on Mythic, I think it's a little better than that. No, let's leave it in A. Or D, A, Jesus Christ. Okay, so that's all the bosses. Before I move on to the actual raids and putting them on this list, I'm going to see if I still agree with all this stuff now that it's here. I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about where things are relatively on each list, like on each row, but see if any of the early ones make a bit more sense to be moved. That's a lot of Sanctum on top. That's how I feel about Sanctum. I feel like Sanctum was full of S, A, and B bosses until it got to the last 3, and then they were just all Ds. Except I put Fatescribe at C, but like you could very well drop this to D. That's actually how it felt. Skolex and Huntsman should not be in the same row. Do you think that Skolex is actually a C second boss? Like honestly, how much worse could Skolex be? Like, or how much, like it's just like a fucking, just a little worm you kill as a second boss, like it's fine. I think the argument is actually that Huntsman is actually better than a B. Like Huntsman is just like a goated second boss. I think it is an A. I'm like thinking about second bosses. No, 1 second. Just last 2 expansions, not 3. Just last 2, just last 2, just last 2. Second bosses. Uldir. Mother. Dude, fucking Huntsman clears Mother. Huntsman's way better. Oh, Grong fucking owns, actually. Huntsman and Grong are very similar. Actually, Grong owns. Blackwater, Behemoth, or Radiance were both your second bosses. Huntsman clears both of those. And your second bosses were Skitra and Maut. Huntsman clears. And then Huntsman clears every other second boss in this expansion. Huntsman's an A. Huntsman's an A tier. I think Sylvanas is an A. I'll stand by it, dude. I'll stand by it. P2's the only reason it's not an S. I'll die on this hill. Okay, now let's talk about the raids. So just without even thinking too much, you can even look at the art. Look at the art of this. Look at this. Castle Nathria is an S tier raid. It is one of the very best raids ever in this game. Probably could be argued top 5, but realistically it's probably 6 or 7. But it's just fucking goated. Very good. That's Sanctum? Oh fuck, never mind. Okay, well whatever one's Nathria, fucking up here. Dude, doesn't this look like a fucking haunted ass castle? This looks like Nathria, dude. Castle Nathria is an S tier raid. Sanctum of Domination. Dude, Sanctum of Domination is so polarizing to rank. Because legit, like the first up and through Painsmith and Sylvanas is good. Top tier or good. And it just hard through after Painsmith. Hard through. Like you can't have that many good bosses and have it be lower than a B. But like you just can't look past the fact that some of those fights existed. Dude, I wonder if Sanctum's A, but people just think it's B because domination shards and everything else. Unswappable covenants. I can't tell. Where do you guys want to rank Sanctum, chat? I'll leave it up to you. You guys look like you agree with B. It's fine. All right. So now Sepulcher. Another very polarizing one. I feel like it has to be higher. It has to be higher than Sanctum. How can you rate a raid that has some of the best bosses ever in the entire game lower than like an A? And only one boss in D, which, oh my god, Pantheon's bad. Oh, I guess it has, yeah, 2 of them in D. Yeah, there's a lot that are kind of like Lords of Dread, insanely mid. Chat voted Jailer at C. Skolex mid. Yeah, it's just a ton of mid. Just a ton of mid. And then it's just the best bosses ever. I'll leave it to chat. Looks like A is going to win. Yeah, I guess, well, so the criteria of this is not just like the bosses. Like, I think like the look and the feel matter too. Like, it can be kind of confusing because we're rating them at the same time as we're rating the bosses, that you can just be like, okay, well, I'm not adding up in my head. There's not as many S tier Nathria bosses as another thing. But like, also, I feel like Castle Nathria perfectly captured the feeling of like a fucking haunted house or like a evil vampire mansion. And that is sick as fuck. Like, that's definitely sick. Very close between A and B, but you guys did say A. Chat rules. All right, this is it. I think I'm happy with this. This is also really fun to do because you actually had an opportunity to like talk about every boss too.